This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
So there's two things on Parshas Naso. Parshas Naso speaks about the concept of Naziros. And the Mishnah Masechta Nazir on Daf Chav Ches. The Mishnah in Masechta Nazir, Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis, going on to Chav Tes Amud Aleph, says an interesting halacha. It says, Ha'ish madir es benoi benazir. A man could make his son a nazir, but v'yein ha'isha madir es benoi benazir. A woman cannot make her son a nazir. Interesting halacha. Why is that? Amar Reish Lakish, why would you make your son a nazir? Says Reish Lakish, kedei lechancha b'mitzvahs. It's a mitzvah of chinuch. The same way a person is obligated to teach his son to put on tefillin and to keep Shabbos, you have to train your son in the mitzvah of Naziros. So the Gemara says, so a woman also. Why can't a woman make her son a Nazir? So the Gemara says, apparently Reish Lakish holds a man is chayiv in chinuch, a woman is not chayiv in the mitzvah of chinuch. As
Shimshon made a Nazir by his mother.
Well, that might have been Al Pi Hadibur. They got the command based on the angel. But in a normal circumstance, only a father could make his son a nazir, not a mother. As the Maritz Chios, very important question, very strong question. We know the mitzvah of chinuch is that since a child is going to be obligated in mitzvahs when he turns 13 years old, when he becomes 13 he's going to have to put on tefillin. When he becomes 13 he's going to have to sit in the sukkah. When he becomes 13 he's going to have to learn Torah. So the Chachamim, with their great wisdom, understood that if they never opened up a sefer before they're 13, if they never kept Shabbos before they're 13, and all of a sudden you spring it upon them, suddenly this is not going to be something that they'll be able to adapt to and adjust to very easily. So in the great wisdom of the Chachamim, they said, you know what? Train them even before the time comes. But that doesn't make any sense when it comes to Nadarim and Naziros, because a person could go a whole lifetime without ever being a Nazir. So why would you train your son in something that is very likely he'll never be doing? It's one thing you want to train him in Torah, he'll be obligated to learn Torah. It's one thing you want to train him in Sukkah, in Lulav, in Tefillin, he'll be obligated in that. But you want to train him in making a neder? Very likely he'll never make a neder. In fact, it's a chet. The Nazir has to bring a karban chatos. So why would you train him in something that very likely he'll never do, and according to some he's discouraged from doing? This is the question of Maritz Chios, to which the Karen Oira answers that this is a different type of chinuch than anywhere else in the Torah. Normally chinuch is, he'll be obligated in a mitzvah when he becomes a bar mitzvah, so now we want to train him to adjust to the mitzvah. Says the Karen Oira, there is a new type of chinuch that is different than all other chinuch in the Torah. And that is, a parent has to train a child to be mistapek b'muat, not to have everything he wants. Not to be accustomed to what we call moisrais, luxury. In other words, part of the mitzvah of training a child is not just to train a child to do this mitzvah, don't do that, do this, you're not allowed to do that. There's a general attitude that you have to give over to a child, and that is to separate himself from something that he's possibly allowed to partake of, but you're training him not to indulge. That is the inyan of training a child in Nazirah. Says the Karanara, Al Keinira, the chinuch zeh lo yidami l'shar chinuch mitzvah. This is different than all other chinuch. The tzarach lechanech es hakatan lasos is a mitzvah. The lozet tzarach sheyagia leklal das k'tzas kol chad kedinai. We know that the mitzvah of chinuch only applies once the child reaches the age of das, which is how old? Not 3 years old, not 4 years old, 6 or 7. Before 6 or 7, there is no mitzvah of chinuch. But the chinuch of Naziros, the chinuch dahacha hu lahafrishay min hamoisrais. This chinuch is to separate a child from luxury, ulahakdishay l'shamayim, to sanctify him, bezehiros, with carefulness, uprishos, and separation. Lazein sarch daitai. We don't even need the child to be of a certain age. Ella ala av muto l'shamra mikol tuma. It's the parent's obligation to guard the child. They made them Nazirim, Me'ez Hivolda, from the time they were born. So this is an important concept, an important hashkafa, that there is a concept of chinuch, not just on specific mitzvos and specific averos, but a general giving over to the child of the concept of lahafrish min hamosros, to separate from luxury. Okay, let's move on a little bit.
Why can't the mother do it? It's the same thing.
Again, because the mother does not have the mitzvah of chinuch.
Next line.
Because, what?
Next line.
If the guys are working, the women are
in general, a mother does not have the mitzvah of chinuch because it's part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Since it's part of Talmud Torah, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is only incumbent on the men, not the women.
My father died when I was 3 years old, and I was raised by a mother and a grandmother. I mean, this doesn't apply to everybody.
No, what we're saying here doesn't mean that they don't have to bring up, but specifically the specific obligation of chinuch rests on the father. Okay, let's move on to another part of the parsha, to Birchas Kohanim. Birchas Kohanim. The whole concept of Birchas Kohanim seems to be very strange in our religion. What, the Kohen gives the bracha? Why exactly do we have these Kohanim get up there, they take off their shoes, they put it under the chair, they wash their hands, they stand there with their hands in that position, and everyone goes under the talus? What exactly is that all about? Are the Kohanim actually giving us the bracha? So we have over here from the Akedas Yitzchak in Parshas Naso, Shar Mem Zayin. Akedas Yitzchak says the following. Says, number 6. He says, Ma toyelas the mitzvah hazais. What benefit is in this mitzvah? Ritzoni, what I mean to say is, when we hear these brachos, from the kohen to the people, what good is it if the kohen gives us a bracha, if God is the one who gives a bracha? What are we adding? What are we giving? If the kohanim do give a bracha, they don't. What? God needs their help. If Hashem wants to give a bracha, He'll give a bracha. And if He doesn't want to give a bracha, He won't give a bracha. What exactly are the kohanim doing? So the Akedas Yitzchak says a very important principle. And the principle is like this. A person's main hatzlacha in this world, and a person's success in this world, is dependent on one thing. His recognition that everything comes from Hashem. Bottom line. A person's ikar hatzlacha in this world is the complete recognition and the fixed emunah is that all money, all honor, everything, all success comes from Hashem. And the more you're able to visualize, and the more you're able to feel, and the more you're able to recognize that everything comes from Hashem, the more bracha you have. And the less you think it comes from God, the more you think it's dependent on your own ingenuity, and your own creativity, and your own efforts, the further you are from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore, Hashem wanted us to feel and recognize that all bracha comes from Him. So you know what He did? It's very hard for us to feel the presence of Hashem, because we don't see Hashem, we don't feel Hashem. It's hard for us to relate to a God that we can't sense with our senses.
We need a physical manifestation.
So Hashem tells the Kohanim, get up there on the bima and command the people, Yivarechecha Hashem. God gives you the bracha. Yoer Hashem panav elecha v'chonecha. God shouts it. Yisa Hashem panav elecha. Tell them again and again and again that it's nothing other than God that gives you the bracha. And when the Jewish people are sitting there in the shul and they see the Kohanim, the leaders of the nation, declaring physically, everything comes from Hashem. Yivarechecha Hashem. Yoer Hashem. Yisa Hashem. V'samu eshemi al b'nei Yisrael. Hashem tells the Kohanim, put my name to the b'nei Yisrael. Keep on telling them my name. And who gives the bracha? V'ani avarchem. And I give the bracha. So, people think, oh, Birchas Kohanim, I'm getting a bracha from the Kohen. You're not getting a bracha from the Kohen. The Kohen is reminding you where bracha comes from. Yivarechecha Hashem. Yisa Hashem. Yoer Hashem. And then Hashem says, V'samu shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani avarchem. So it's also an important concept to bear in mind. One last thing. By the Nesim, at the end of the Parsha, it talks about all the Nesim, and by all the Nesim it says the word Nasi, except for by Shevet Yehuda. By Nachshon ben Aminadav, it says Nachshon ben Aminadav Lamata Yehuda. The Torah points out, by all the Nesim it says Nasi, except for Yehuda. Why? So the Torah says a very interesting thing. Because Yehuda always taught his tribe to make themselves small. Like it says that when Yehuda comes to Yosef, he says, let your servant stay as a Eved to my master. He spoke about himself in very humble terms. Also we find David HaMelech, David hu HaKatan. So this was a character trait of Shevet Yehuda, to speak of themselves in humble terms, and therefore by the Shevet of Yehuda it just says Nachshon ben Aminadav, and it doesn't say the word Nasi. Interestingly, Rav Shimon Schwab.
What about the difference between Hamakrib and Hikrib? The He Hamakrib by Yom Rishon.
So it said
By Yom Sheni Hikrib.
Yeah.
So it means almost like they did it in a different way.
Yeah. He points out, okay, interesting, that there is another difference, that is by Shevet Yehuda, it says Vikarbanai, and by all the other Shvatim it says Karbanai, without a Vav. So he says like this, there could have been another reason why it doesn't say Nasi by Shevet Yehuda. And that is, who died by the Chanukas Hanasim? Nadav and Avihu died. If Nadav and Avihu died, who was the sister of Nadav and Avihu? Elishava. Elishava was the sister, right? Elishava was the daughter.
She was the mother of Nadav and Avihu.
Who was the Nasi of Shevet Yehuda?
Nachshon ben Aminadav.
Nachshon. Who was the sister of Nachshon?
Nachshon was Elisheva.
Elishava.
She was the mother.
Who was Be'avelos during the Chanukas Hanasim? Elishava. So in deference to his sister, says Rav Shimon Schwab, Nachshon, whose sister was Elishava, who was Be'avelos, she was unable to experience the joy of the Chanukas Hanasim, and perhaps that's the reason why the word Nasi is removed from Nachshon ben Aminadav. And that could be why it says not Karbanai, but Vikarbanai. Because Karbanai implies there was a strong connection between him and his carbon. Vikarbanai implies that there was some kind of disconnect, that he was not able to feel and assume the full joy from bringing the carbon, and that's because he...
It does say Karbano in the beginning of the puzzle. So he, Hamakrib by Yom Rishon is Karbano, Nachshon ben Aminadav.
But in terms of...
It's a big Karbano, because it already referred to his carbon, where in the other Museum, the first time it refers to a carbon, it says Karbano.
Okay.
Since it's already said Karbano, it's not going to say it again.
Okay, but you could make the case that it says Vahi Hamakrib Vayom Rishon Es Karbanai with an Asnachta, and then after the Asnachta, it says immediately Nachshon ben Aminadav Lamata Yehuda. And then now it says Vik Karbanai to indicate that because of his sister's Avelos, Nachshon we know is married to what? Nachshon's sister was, Elishava. Elishava was Ba'avelos over Nadav Avihu, and perhaps because of that it doesn't say the word Nasi by Nachshon ben Aminadav. Rabbi Sai, Agun Shab.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.